Ancient of Days. What we're going to have right now is sort of a panel of people whose goal is to convince me, say you're a skeptic, in 15 minutes or less that abductions are real, that they're worth looking into. And what we've already seen from this weekend, we're going to emphasize that they are indeed worthy of scientific and or theological explanation, study, discuss. Nobody cares what any source says about this stuff until they think it's real. It's not a perceived need, it's not a perceived net or threat, it's not a perceived interest. So just like the website said, if you don't believe the UFO phenomena are real, but you're an honest skeptic, then our speaker's goal this weekend is to convince you of it. I'm one of the four. It's going to be myself, Lisa Davis, then Mike Heiser, then Jim Hickman. Jim is probably going to do the first 15 minutes of the talk he's going to do later, and then we'll take a good break, and then he'll just get right into the real meat and the photo-intensive stuff from his talk. You'll probably be glad to know this will be the one talk, in quotes, that I get through without actually having to read anything off of a paper, because I haven't prepared for it one bit, other than what I know kind of off the top of my head. I think I spent more time on my top 10 list than I did on what I was going to do here today. But what I'm really going to do is, I've got a lot of books up here, hardbacks, big thick books. I'm not going to sit there and yank out quote after quote after quote after quote to convince you of it. But none of these books have a religious theme or nature to them. They're just some of the best and most often quoted secular books in the field, and I'm going to give you an overview of what they are. In fact, I've got a skeptics link on alienresistance.org that has a lot of these book covers. You can just click through and read what Amazon said about them. But one of the appeals I'm going to make, just for dramatic effect, that's a big book. It's about 40 bucks. It was rare and out of print for a while. This is thick. And this is not, I'll just say what it is rather than it's not. Alien Discussions, Proceedings of the Abduction Study Conference. This was held 1992, someone correct me if I'm wrong, at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's this thick. The back of the cover, they took it topic by topic on the psychology of abductees, the physical evidence, the multiple witnesses, the medical evidence, the abduction experience. This was nothing but, the goal was they asked the same question, is this stuff for real? Should the world look into it or not? I mean, there's a unanimous yes without ever declaring what it was or what it wasn't. But it was co-chaired by Dr. from Harvard, MD, Dr. John Mack, who's one of the pioneers in abduction research. He's had many people come to him over the years and just said, I've been abducted. He finally began to take it seriously enough to document the repeating claims of people. That's what you're going to find when you research abductions with open-mindedness. The claims are almost identical all over the world. There's no common denominator other than they've had this experience. Their cultural influences, such as television, are different. There's parts of the world where people don't even know what TV or ET is, that their experiences are recorded, and it tells the same story that people in America see on television, more or less. But John Mack, this is one of his most groundbreaking books. Like I said, he's an MD at Harvard. I'm going to list all these names and their credentials for a pretty specific reason, because rather than me try to convince you of it, you're going to see that credentialed people with reputations on the line and careers have been convinced enough to go ahead and publish and put their name on it. This Alien Discussions proceeding, co-chaired by John Mack and David Jacobs here. His first book on the topic, or that I have here anyway, was The Threat. And then his second one, no, this was his second, I'm wrong. Secret Life, first-hand documented accounts of UFO abductions. David M. Jacobs, Ph.D., teaches at Temple University, and I believe it's either him or John Mack that's tenured, which means they can't be fired. But before they even got into this and publishing it, they had to reach the point in their professional career where they couldn't be fired before they go on record with any of this stuff. But what he has done This documents the people he's talked to, the cases he's studied, what I'd say he considers the most credible stuff here. And the conclusions he came up with for his book, The Threat, is that other than the fact that it's real and that it's going on, he's said that an apparently hostile hybridization program is indeed undergoing in America right now or the world over. What he's saying is that the entities, aliens, whatever you'll call them, they're specifically engineering a hybrid race between themselves and humanity for their purposes. We're their lab rats. Our needs, our interests are not what they're trying to serve. Again, he doesn't have a religious bone in his body. He's got no agenda other than to just document the truth and, in a sense, warn people it's real. Yeah, it's going on. I did invite David Jacobs. In fact, I invited him and Jacques Vallée to this conference. Jacques Vallée I invited to be the keynote speaker, in fact. Mike suggested, well, let's go for all the marbles, see if you can get Jacques Vallée as a UFO researcher. Both of them replied to me positively. I was glad to hear that, in the sense that Jacques Vallée says, he's a big internet entrepreneur now. If you don't know it, Jacques Vallée, not Al Gore, but Jacques Vallée invented the internet. You can research that, and no lie. But he's busy with what he's doing. He says he stays out of the public ufology debate right now. He wrote the foreword to Richard Dolan's book, as well as the foreword to Ann Druffel's book, who's speaking later today. He just basically thanked me. Didn't really blow me off. David was even closer. I'm not on a first-name basis, but he was even closer to coming. He loved the lineup. He loved that we were doing this seriously in Roswell, which is, I'd say, blackballed among the UFO community because they all know it's a festival. The serious researchers won't come within 100 miles of here in July. There's some good people here in town right now. I mean, Stanton Friedman's very good, the astronaut Edgar Mitchell. But what the festival has done in the past has included retired Star Trek actors, UFO cult recruiters, and time travelers. Not that there's anything wrong with time travel, but they have been the credibility factor of the festival. You can see if our headliners are PhDs and political activists and medical experts on the topic. The other headliners are Willie Nelson. So you can see the difference between a festival and a conference. I like Willie Nelson. I grew up in Nashville. What I was going to say, David, he simply said that for the first time ever, he's teaching summer school at Temple. His son is entering high school, or is entering college next year. He's a senior right now. So all of his weekends were going to be spent shopping around colleges for him. Basically what this panel came up to is if what these people are not saying is happening to them, what is then? That's the question this book poses. So they've got psychiatric reports that say abductees, they're not any more or less delusional than average. They're not any more or less fantasy prone than average, and to the annoyance of the skeptic community, they're actually well above average intelligence in most cases. If they've got a hybridization program going on, they're going for the best genetic stock they can get their hands on. They're not going for the worst. They're not going for the Billy Bobs or the idiots or the people that are even bad physical specimens. But Harvard, Temple, co-chaired this, not the schools, just individuals that work there or teach there. They co-chaired it and put it on at MIT. If someone gets held at MIT, that's got to tell you something already. This book is by C.D.B. Bryan, Alien Abduction, UFOs, and the conference at MIT. As one of many professional journalists who covered the event, he wrote a big fat book about it. And without even getting into his opinions, he summarizes much of what was gone over in this book. This book is just full of charts, transcripts and stuff like that. Well, he comes as a skeptic from the outside, but an honest skeptic, documents the whole thing as best he can. And he walked away pretty convinced himself. Is he a Pulitzer Prize winner? I would have to look that up. No, he's not. I think he mentioned someone else was. I'm just trying to lean towards credentials here. But this is another Reaching for Reality by Constance Clear, who was killed in a motorcycle wreck last year. What you can also find among the UFO literature is there's many independent people with credentials, the scale of their credentials ranges from up and down, but they're people who cared enough, and they stopped calling people crazy. They said, okay, I'll listen to you. She's just a professional psychotherapist, had nothing to do with alien abductions, no interest. She got, big city in Texas, I forget where, she got enough calls on it, though, that she was like, I'm going to have to listen to the first one of these people. I'm going to have to hear them through. Then the second one. So this is just the people that let her publish her reports. There's many other authors, many other books that have done this from one level or another.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Did you say that she was killed?
Well, she had a motorcycle accident, yes. She wasn't murdered. She loved...
She has died, is what you're saying.
Yeah, she has.
I knew her. I met her.
Just last year.
It was in El Paso, and
Okay.
I did not know that she was gone.
I think it was October, November. It was a good, a serious loss to the UFO community. Because again, she wasn't a ufologist. She wasn't an abductologist. She had a professional career, and she came across something astounding and amazing in her research that she finally had to publish for the sake of posterity. This is a book, Roger Lear and Daryl Sims, who is speaking down at the convention center several times over the weekend doing workshops. Between the two of them, I think they started out together, in fact. They have done some of the best medical evidence and research. Jim Hickman has interviewed both of them on his radio show, and he'll be including material from both of these guys, I'm sure. But Aliens and the Scalpel, Dr. Roger Lear, DPM, Mike will tell you what that stands for, I guess. I don't know. And Daryl Sims, who's the researcher in Houston. I've seen one of his talks here in Roswell. If you can get as close up as you can here. He does physical implant removal. He puts you through lie detector. He's ex-CIA, honestly. He puts you through handwriting analysis. He makes sure that you're telling the truth before he'll even talk to you for much. But if you claim or you think you've had a UFO abduction experience, they will, for free, they'll find it on an x-ray if there's anything wrong with your body. And these implants that they've removed, there's no entry wound, there's no little tiny, tiny specks of metal, but enough to cause an irritation to where the person knew for sure something was there. And they'll remove them for free. They turn them over to labs for scientific analysis and then return them to the abductee. But there's no entry wound. There's no corpuscles fighting the infection or the implant. If you got a piece of glass or metal or anything accidentally stuck in you, your body would wrap it with white tissues and stuff like that. It would be almost a hard knot. If your body couldn't eject it, it would wrap it. If it treated it as something foreign to your object, everybody's body accepts these implants, and there's no entry wounds, or how in the heck did they get in there? And in some cases, the things, this is crazy, you'd have to see it happen on video. Whitley Strieber has shown the video at a conference I was at once, to where you can see them going after an implant in his ear, and the thing just begins to move away from the surgeon's scalpel. He went up his ear another quarter of an inch before the surgeon said, no, I can't go anymore, I'm going to ruin your ears if I do this. So Whitley Strieber still got his. I'm just doing a little 10-minute introduction on the topic to warm it up. All I'm really making the pitch for here, without being convincing myself, is that people with this type of reputations, they could be making a lot of money and earning a lot of respect in something else, but they have entered what Stephen Bassett calls the intellectual ghetto. Because if you believe in this stuff and you put your name behind it, it doesn't matter how many PhDs, how many stars of a general you are, how credible you are, the media and the government just reside you to this intellectual ghetto that you will never ever get out of again, because your name has been associated with something that's silly. But these are all people that have put their professional careers, their names with their families on the line, because they've been so convinced that this stuff is real, even against they went into it skeptic in some cases, even against their best hopes. They may have tried to disprove it, in fact, and came out, I've got to publish this. The world needs to know. Whatever their other motivation is, all they want is the truth. So that's basically my pitch. That's my appeal. If PhDs and doctors and professional people will put their names and their careers on the line to bring you this information, if they're convinced enough to do that, then I'm saying the information, the evidence out there to convince you is also available if you're honest enough to be willing to convince by honest evidence. That's all I have on that, but all we're going to do is switch mics. No applause, really. Lisa Davis is going to come up. She goes to a lot of UFO conferences. The speakers probably know her as well as anybody. I don't think she's publicly spoken on this topic before, but we've seen her around enough to where Joe and I were in D.C. at the X conference talking to her, and I was like, hey, let's give Lisa 15 minutes. She knows her stuff. She studied this as much as anybody. And Ann Druffel told me that there's just no way she was going to get up and talk at 8 in the morning. So Eve Lorgen told me the same thing. Come on up, Lisa, and then we'll switch out the mics. Or do I need to switch out? Is that a second one?
No, that's
okay. You have to talk into this one for the room to hear you, and this other one that's going to be taped on you is for the straight into the video. Fafars.com, F-F-A-R-S.com. Foundation for Abduction Research and Support is her website. And depending on what Mike and Jim bring, we may be able to begin to take a couple questions as the four of us. Neither of those guys plans to go very long.
It's okay. You're just getting fresh.
Right on.
Okay. Good morning.
Hold it closer.
Okay. Well, my name's Lisa Davis, and I've been running a website called FARS for about 2 years now, and it's kind of been an adventure for me. I didn't come through the door of ufology through an abduction experience or a sighting. I basically came through it as a little girl, just curious about the world, and seeing the moon out in the sky was just beautiful to me. And guy's coaching me, thank you.
Mic all the way up.
And I just had an interest in astronomy, and I would talk to my dad about it and just tell him, you know, who made all that stuff? How did those stars get out there? Why are they just hanging there and they don't fall? And I started understanding gravity, and just as a young woman, young girl actually, I just was really interested in science and astronomy and philosophy, I guess you could say, because I was wondering, who made all of this? Why is this all here? Why am I here? Why am I standing on this planet? And I can look up and see all this other stuff. Is there other people out there? Are we the only ones? And so probably a lot of you have had that, you know, kind of attitude towards when you were a child looking at this great universe, wondering where it all came from. And then a little movie that you may have heard about by Steven Spielberg came out called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And when I saw that movie, the first scene where Richard Dreyfuss gets abducted in his truck, or not abducted, I'm sorry, he gets rattled basically by the experience of the UFO coming down, the car turns off. I was just totally in awe of that scene. It had never happened to me, but I almost wished that it did because it was so cool. And so I was like, wow, what is going on? And as a young girl, of course, you see the movies and you think, well, did this happen? Is this real? You know, I didn't know what fiction and nonfiction was at the time. I just saw that and thought, that is really cool. It's different. It's not something that you see in cartoons. It's not, you know, it's paranormal. And I realized at that point I had a love for everything that wasn't mainstream normal. And ghosts, got into studying that, and just all things like that. I guess I can thank my dad for buying me my first telescope. He reluctantly bought it because I threw a fit on the floor of Toys R Us and wouldn't leave the store without it. And I guess he and my mom had a conversation in the car that there was something more to my love of the sky and the stars and that movie than they were comfortable with. And so my dad started looking into the UFO phenomenon. We watched the movie together probably 3 times, and went to the movie theater. You know, back then we didn't have DVD or CD or a videotape. And so we went and saw the movie a few times, and I really just was fascinated by that movie. Just from beginning to end, I couldn't take my mind off of it. Became almost obsessed with it, to where I wanted to write Steven Spielberg, and I wanted to know why he wrote that, you know, what's going on, why are you bringing this story out when all the other movies are about love and romance, and, you know, it just was so non-mainstream. So, you know, I grew up and just regular teenager, just still loved astronomy, never really kind of dabbled into it, just kind of got into boys and things like that. And, you know, about 18 years old, you start realizing the meaning of life and wondering what it's all about again, and thinking, well, there's got to be more to life than just going to parties, hanging out with my friends, going shopping. And my family was Catholic, and we went to church once a year, and I went through a really hard time when I was about 18 years old. My dad died, and that was really crushing for me because he was my bud. You know, he was my person to take everything to, and he would understand me and I would understand him, and you probably have somebody in your life like that that is very important, and when you lose them when you're a teenager, it's devastating, and I felt like I lost my bearings. And so I always relished the fact that we love to talk about astronomy together. We love to talk about outer space. We love to talk about what he would call the goobly glops, which were the aliens. And I went to church to ask the pastor, or the priest actually, because I was a Catholic, and I asked the priest, I said, you know, I'm really curious, do you believe God made all of this? And what about this UFO stuff? You know, what's going on there? I want to know answers. And he couldn't give me any. He was like, well, you just need to pray for your sins. And he was, you know, more evangelistic, trying to get me on the path to God, which I can appreciate. You know, I eventually got there anyways, but he wasn't very helpful. And so I decided to read the Bible. And I decided to look into the Bible and see what ghosts were all about, see what the UFO phenomenon was all about. And there was nothing in it that I could find at the time about UFOs or ghosts or anything paranormal. So I was a little disappointed. So I went to the book of Revelations, because everybody says, oh, the book of Revelations, there's so many interesting stories and so much, you know, prophecy. And just at 18, you know, I don't really get into all of this, but I was just like, okay, I'll read it. You know, sounds good to me. It sounds different and paranormal. I'll read it. And I struggled through it and couldn't understand any of it. It was just too vivid and too graphic, and there's just too much symbology in there that I just couldn't understand at the age. So I just put that down and said, forget this, and just decided to leave that chapter of my life behind. Didn't ask any more questions. It didn't seem like a popular question to ask. What do you think about UFOs? What do you think about the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? So later in life, I kind of, you know, got married and had a couple of kids, and started a candle business. And I thought, okay, this is great. I did well in it, and in my town, I'm still known as the Candle Lady, and I loved doing it, but it was not enough. It just wasn't stimulating this mind that was always wondering, what is it all about? I just always had that deep-seated question in my heart. And I picked the Bible up again. And it just always seemed to be there. It always seemed to be something that I knew had the answer, but I just didn't understand it. So I finally read the book of Proverbs. And when I read the book of Proverbs, all of my answers in life were answered. All of my questions in life were answered. And I started having a relationship with God. And I became a Christian. I became born again. And it was life-changing. It was great. It was great knowing who God is, knowing that He loved me, knowing that He was my Heavenly Father and He wouldn't leave me. He wouldn't die like my earthly father did. And He would always listen to me. And so I got stronger and stronger in my faith, attended church regularly. I went to a school to learn about the Bible, to learn about archaeology, I don't have any degrees, but I do have a very deep-seated interest in finding out the truth of anything. So, let's see, where did I go from there? Somebody had taken me to the book of Genesis. Oh, I remember. I had asked the pastor of the church, I said, you know, what do you think about UFOs? I just went up to him. I'm kind of a social person. I don't have a problem going up and asking people random questions, you know. And he just looked at me like, why are you asking me this? And he seemed a little uncomfortable, and it kind of bothered me. And so he just said, you know, you should probably look into angelology. And I thought, angelology? Well, I was Catholic. I'm not going to go there, you know. And I came to Genesis chapter 6, and it just totally fascinated me. I just thought, what is going on here? It seemed like a very strange phenomenon, very strange paranormal activity, having the sons of God coming down. And I thought, well, who are the sons of God? These are angels? And then it took me into what kind of angels are they, and what does the Hebrew language say about these angels? What is the meaning of the Benai Elohim? And those questions became an obsession for me. And I started looking into it and realizing that the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings, in the very 6th chapter of it, there's stories of abductions. And I thought, okay, this is the key. This is the key, maybe. And it made sense to me, yet it was still a little foggy, but there was a connection there, and I couldn't walk away from it. So I told you I went to a Bible school, and we went down to Juarez, Mexico, which is about 4 hours away from here. And we were staying in El Paso, and I knew Roswell was up here, and I thought, you know, it's just 3 hours away. Let's just go check it out, you know. It wasn't a 4th of July weekend. I had no idea they had a festival. All I knew was that it was a small town, something happened there, and I wanted to talk to some people who lived there. I mean, I was even planning on going door to door or opening the phone book and just saying, hey, can I come over and talk to you? Do you know Corso? Did you know this guy? Or, you know, are you in the military? I just wanted to know. I was just curious. And when I came up here, I was just totally shocked at the storefronts and the museum. The museum was awesome. That was just like, you know, that just sold me right there. I was like, okay, I got to look into this more. But talking to the people on the storefronts, they all had this different philosophy and, you know, this New Age stuff, this channeling, and just very bizarre meanings for the abduction phenomenon. And I was asking them, well, have you ever read the Bible? There's an account in the Bible. Well, no, the Bible doesn't talk about abductions, you know. But they didn't really look into it, so how would they know that? And I had, so I knew that. So I was armed with that. At the same time, not wanting to be rude to them and push aside their belief system, because if they had done that to me, I would have been offended. My belief system is something that I hold on to dearly, and you're not going to change it unless you're very convincing. So I didn't convince anybody, but I did learn a lot through coming up here. And I loved the town. I live in San Diego, and it's the rat race, basically. And you know, it's very busy, it's very crowded, and it's beautiful, but everybody wants to be there. And so it's not where I want to stay the rest of my life, but that's another story. What ended up happening was I met a man who was studying fallen angels. And when you study the abduction phenomenon, you come to that conclusion. Maybe it's fallen angels. You have to go there in order to understand the whole phenomenon. You can't just take, well, it's just a biblical thing. Well, it's just an extraterrestrial thing. Well, it's just a myth. You have to take the whole subject matter and bring it into a funnel of your belief system. And wherever your belief system lies is where your answers are going to lie. I forgot one thing that I wanted to tell you was when we came to Roswell, there was a group of us. After I left Roswell, I was like, oh gosh, these people need God. They need prayer. These people are lost. And that was very judgmental of me, I admit now. And a little bit naive, but it got me praying. It got me praying. And I was praying, God, you know what? You need to put some Christians over there. These people need the Lord, and they need to hear God's word, and they need God's love. Everyone wants God's love. Everybody wants to be loved. And they need God's love. And so I started praying, please put somebody over there, somebody, because I wanted to do it, but I knew my husband was not going to move to Roswell. He was just like, you go, bye-bye. You know, he wasn't going to move there. And I had mentioned it to him, actually. I really wanted to be here. I really wanted to learn this. And after looking on the internet for a while, you know, maybe I found one or two people that were able to say, this is what I think the abduction phenomenon is. And it kind of got me like, you remember in the movie Close Encounters where Richard Dreyfuss, like, after he has his experience, he becomes obsessed with finding out what's going on, and he starts like throwing the dirt in the house, and his kids are like, "Whoa, cool! What's going on? You know, we're playing dirt in the house," and you know, his wife is just like, "Okay, you've lost it. I'm out of here." Well, I kind of like got everything I could find on UFOs and abductions, and like every week I was bringing bags of books in the house, just bags and bags. And I kind of like, last night I was thinking about that. I thought, gosh, all that dirt was those books. I was just bringing all those books in there and reading everything I could about it. And I have a huge library now. I've read everything I could get my hands on, especially abductions. And you know, you can't look into UFOs and not see the connection with abductions. So I see UFOs as the hardware, kind of like a computer system, and abductions are like the software. It's the program. And I'm not really a nuts and bolts type person. I can't sit here and tell you about nuclear physics. I can't tell you about things that Mr. Heiser can or David Flynn could, but I could tell you that I care about people, and I care about understanding the meaning of what everybody else is looking for, trying to answer it for them, trying to help them with finding their answers, not answer it for them, but help them find their answers. So I started looking into it, and I told you I had a candle business, and I had just learned what the internet was, and I made a website for my candles, and I was doing great business, and I thought, well, I'm going to put a website up about the UFO phenomenon and see what happens. I'm going to tell people that abductions are in the Bible. They're actually in there. You can check it out, read it for yourself, and maybe they'll find the Lord. Maybe they'll get saved. Maybe they'll start having a better life, you know. And people started emailing me their stories, just flooding in. I mean, I didn't even submit myself to a search engine at all. I just put it up there, and I guess after a couple months, they pick you up anyways. And a lot of Christians were telling me that they were being abducted still, and I was like, well, what? That's weird. That doesn't seem right. And I started thinking, well, why are Christians being abducted? Why are regular people, non-Christians, just people, ordinary people, why are they being abducted? And all of the research points to the same thing. It has its own signature, its own fingerprint. And the stories change a little, but they're all basically the same thing happening over and over and over. And there's a theme running through there. And if you're a contactee, it's not a sinister theme to you. You enjoy it. You embrace it. You are enlightened by it. Great. That's your thing. You've come to that place. I respect that. I have not come to that conclusion. I've come to the conclusion it's sinister. There's an agenda. I've read Jacobs. I've read everything on, you know, Bud Hopkins. I met Bud, spoke to him at length. And they're not there to help us. I personally don't think they're here to help us. They're here to help themselves. Whatever their agenda is, we don't know the whole picture right now. We're just looking at pieces of what they let us see right now. I started about a year ago looking into the medical ramifications of abductions, like the brain. You know, you hear of the implants being put in, and I'm thinking, okay, well, they're putting the implants in the nasal cavity, and why would they put it there? Why is that like the main place that they want to go? And then I started thinking, where is the memory center of the brain? And if you look at an anatomy chart, you find that the hippocampus and the amygdala are in the very back part of your brain, in the middle, but it's very easily accessible through your sinus cavity. And I started thinking, maybe they're stopping the memory. Maybe a lot of us have been abducted. We don't know it, and our memories have been somehow erased. Jacobs and Mr. Hopkins, they did the Roper poll in '97, and they were astonished at their findings. They found out that more Americans are being abducted than they were comfortable with knowing about. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm an abductee. Maybe that's why I have such an interest in this. I still, to this day, haven't come to that conclusion. I don't think I am. But anything is possible in the realm of the supernatural. In the realm of the paranormal, anything is possible. I just want to tell you that I've been working with abductees for a little while now. After hearing their stories, you know, they give you your phone number. They earn you earn their trust by being objective and not judging them and just being kind and polite and offering them some little tidbit of wisdom you may have learned in life. And I've gotten close to some of them. I've actually met a few in my town, and you know, my research has taken me where all the mainstream ufology has gone. I've talked to Mr. Sims. I've done the fluorescent lighting. I've taken the pictures of the scoop marks and the scratches and the triangles, the red triangles. I've taken pictures of all that. I've seen it firsthand. And these people, they don't do this to themselves. They don't sit there and make these marks. These things are supernatural. They're paranormal. And they also have memories of some kind of a being, some white light. So abductions, you know, you kind of have to put your reputation on the line to talk about this because it's kind of a crazy subject. I mean, people don't just get into ufology and start, you know, studying abductions. And I'm so convinced of it, I'm willing to put my neck out there. I'm willing to put my reputation out there. I'm willing to tell my family, yeah, you know, I like doing this. And my kids accept it. My husband accepts it. And I have a great life in that sense. But my goal is, it is still to share God's love with people. You know, I still have that flavor in me of wanting to tell people about God and what He's done for me. And my testimony is you know, very important. I don't have time today to give it to you, but God has changed me quite a bit. And this hypotheses of the Genesis chapter 6 and other areas in the Bible have just made complete sense to me. I'm totally convinced that it's a phenomenon happening, that it's of the proportion of the Bible. And we'll find our answers there. We'll find our help there. We'll find the meaning of life there. And so on my website, I have a page dedicated to the 4 hypotheses. I haven't seen this on any other websites, and I love the internet. You guys probably do too. It's, you know, I'm addicted to it. And the 4 main hypotheses that I've run into constantly over time studying this phenomenon is the extraterrestrial hypotheses, which is that they come from another planet, and that's usually what most Americans believe. If they don't, you know, if they don't look into this at all, that's what they believe. They just think, yeah, that's the most rational conclusion. There's the interdimensional hypotheses, which is a little bit more in depth. It's probably more of what the New Age movement would say that they believe. There's the God hypotheses, which is obviously what I believe and what a lot of people here believe. And then there's the myth, which is the actual belief system of the U.S. government. They'll tell you it's just a myth. So all 4 of these hypotheses, there's probably 3 or 4 more that I'd like to add to that, but these are the 4 main ones that get people's attention. They get people's attention and they get people thinking and they get them wondering about it. And so that's maybe my little goal in this and my little area of what I can contribute to this field is maybe to get people thinking about it, showing them what I've found, and helping them through it. I can't help every one of them, but I know that if more people take the field, if more people have that like-mindedness that I do to help other people that are going through this, because what they're going through is traumatic. What they're going through is devastating. And what they're going through is harsh. And I know I don't want to go through it, but I can be there to support them. And I have a passion for it, so I'm going to. You know, in the end of the movie, Close Encounters, Richard Dreyfuss basically leaves his family, and he goes up the hill. He finds the hill that he's been thinking of and obsessed with that he built in his front room, and he finds it and realizes that there's something here that I need to be here for. He doesn't really exactly know why, but his purpose is so strong and his intentions are so strong that he goes to find it out. And that's kind of like what I feel like I've done. I've gone to find it out. And what did he find? He found the nice spindly creatures coming out, just real nice, with all the Air Force people coming out, the children coming out that have been abducted, and it was a real nice, happy feeling, and the music was cool, and the lighting was cool, and the effects were cool. But I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's going to end up like that. I don't think it's going to be, hi, we're here to help you. So we need to be careful and be watchful and be mindful. Go to conferences, learn all you can about it. Don't discount the Christian attitude because we're Christians. We are Christians, but we love people. We love you guys. We want to share this with you because we love you. We want you to understand this because it makes sense. It's not crazy. And that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Mike and Jim are both going to do about 15 minutes each. Where'd you go? Bright Lights, big city. Here's getting to me. And Jim, like I said, he's going to basically open his next talk with what he's going to share here.
Oh. Okay.
And when Jim's finished, it'll be 9:30 when Jim finishes, which is when he's scheduled to start. So unless you feel you need it, we'll barely take a 10-minute break long enough to reset the video, which sometimes takes 10 minutes. I've learned. So you guys know that. You know,
This isn't worth it for you.
we're on the schedule as much as we ever are.
Do I just start talking? I'm going to try to take less than 15 minutes to give Jim as much time as possible. This isn't my area of expertise. I think you all know that by now. But I have done a good bit of reading when it comes to the abduction phenomenon, so I'll summarize this real quickly. I tend to look at things as an academic because, for better or worse, that's what I am. And if someone, let's just say in my church or something like that, would walk up to me and say, boy, you know, why do you do this? And they do. They do ask me that. What is it about this subject matter that you think it deserves to be taken seriously? Speaking specifically of abductions now. And I tend to turn the tables on them. My approach is, okay, I could give you, the positive response and try to answer that question for you, but what I'd rather hear from you is you convince me why the research that has been done in this is not just perhaps partially flawed, because everybody makes mistakes, okay, in any kind of research. Just because somebody has a PhD doesn't mean they're never wrong. You go to graduate school, you function as an academic. That's just the nature of the discourse. You're trying to interact with everybody else's views, and everybody can't be right. So I'll admit to you that there could be mistakes in the research, but you tell me why it's completely wrong. Okay, and then I will go into, just as Guy did, the people that, as an academic, make me respect their work. And usually I get asked this kind of question in the context of either other people in other fields coming to me, again, because of essentially my life context. I can't go through a day without bumping into 2 or 3 PhDs. That's just where I live, the place I live, the place I go to church. So usually if you bring up people who are credentialed, who are actually doing research in this area, you at least gain a footing, you at least gain a hearing. And so I will present to them Dr. Mack, Dr. Jacobs, others in the field, Dr. Valet, Dr. Greg Little, who hasn't been mentioned here but I think deserves mention for his work comparing the abduction phenomenon to medieval texts and things like that. All of them have PhDs. You don't get a PhD in ufology, but they have PhDs in legitimate fields. They know what academic discourse is. They know what research methodology is, and I think they all make a good effort, anyway, to have sound methodology. Again, it's not going to be perfect. So I'll tend to ask a person, okay, here these people are. They do this at their own professional risk. Their work has been evaluated, and like anything else in academics, It gets discussed, it gets critiqued, it gets fine-tuned, mistakes are uncovered, and the effort is made to correct them and interact with the exchange. So you tell me why all of this is completely wrong. And I've yet to have any response to that. I don't do it deliberately as a disarming thing, but it has that effect. And so once they're introduced, and once I was introduced to some of these people, because you're taught in graduate school, you're taught in academia to respect people who have legitimate credentials. You don't have to agree with them, of course, but you're taught to respect the time they've put into the subject. And I have been self-taught, and I think both by my own efforts and both by experience, to respect people who spend a lot of time in research without the credential. I don't really care about the credential. All a PhD is a union card. If you want to be employed in academia, you've got to have one 99% of the time. It is not something that means, we're smart and you're not. Although some academics think that way. Having been in the Ivy League, okay, I understand that mentality and just frankly despise it. But when I was introduced to the work of some of these people, I thought, at the very least, I should read what they say. And as Guy says, this will be a little repetitious, so I'm going to be quick with it. It's true. The major studies have concluded, profiling abductees, that they don't fit neatly into one category. They're not nuts. Some of them are. But many of them, and I'd be willing to say perhaps most of them, are just normal. They're just normal people. They don't have any kind of psychological defect in them inherently. And they do tend to be well educated. You go to the conferences like this, you just run into people like that. And so not being able to peg abductees psychologically in a pejorative or a dismissive way, I thought, well, something has to be happening to these people. Personally, I will say this much. I think there are categories that fit under the umbrella term of abduction. I think there are some people who get abducted, get abused by entities. Right? What you want to call that entity is up to really your own presuppositions, your own research. As a theist, as a supernaturalist, I have no trouble affirming that this happens to people in a supernatural realm. That is not to dismiss the physical or exclude the physical. I don't see them as mutually exclusive by any means. I also tend to think that the abduction scenario is fabricated, and what I mean by that is I'm not saying the abductee makes it up. You probably have people who just do it for attention, but they get weeded out pretty quickly by the serious researchers. I'm talking about people who find what I'll call the alien scenario a convenient tool for manipulating people, either individuals or lots of people en masse. And specifically, I think those who are doing work with military abductions, my labs, so to speak, that's a very valuable contribution. That category is undeniable in the literature. If you're into abductions, you read the literature, it's as intellectually dishonest for you to dismiss that category as it is an outsider to dismiss the whole issue. Okay, it is not just aliens, okay, or whatever you want to call them. I think there are just frankly evil people who are using it to manipulate individuals and frankly manipulate a mass consciousness. I think personally it's preparatory to a new paradigm that will emerge, and it isn't going to be good. I agree with Jacobs. By the way, if you are a regular listener to Coast, David Jacobs was on the show maybe 4 or 6 weeks ago, something like that, and I caught him, and he just point blank says that when we started in this in the 70s, he has his PhD from Wisconsin, as I do. He actually did his dissertation on the UFO problem in America in the late 60s. So he was in it from the mid to late 60s into the 70s, and he said specifically in the 70s when this stuff started to really sort of emerge, the operating paradigm among all people who did this was that they're experimenting. They're scientists. They just want to find out about us. He very forcefully said, I just don't believe that anymore. Whatever they're doing, it is of no investigative interest. They're doing it essentially because they can. And they have their own agenda. He claims, I don't know what it is, but they're doing it because they can. And I tend to agree with him. I think other people who have no spiritual commitments at all come down in that area. To me, I'm just forced to opt for that position. I do think it's the most coherent position. And I agree with somebody like Jacobs who takes that position. I don't think his work and his analysis can be easily dismissed. Of course, Mack is another story. He takes a different view. But that's sort of where I am. I have different categories. I think I should be asking you why you don't believe this because of the research. Second reason is because just do the numbers. If you take Mack's research, Jacob's research, and you look at the number of people who claim to have some sort of abduction experience, if even 10% of them are telling the truth, that's a lot of people. In other words, it's a nice way of saying, I don't believe that every solitary person who meets the proper psychological criteria, I don't believe that all of them are lying. I think that's just absurd to say everybody's a liar. Especially when you go back and you start to see some of the same patterns prior to the science fiction era, prior to the modern era. Again, even down to collection of semen and eggs and stuff like this in medieval literature and even some earlier stuff. I just don't think everybody has shared the same story, like to get it right, and just lied. I think it's just logically and frankly mathematically absurd to conclude that. So I usually ask people those two things. Why is all the research wrong? I mean, all of it, everything. The whole thing is just a complete fabrication. And demonstrate to me in any other area how this many people can all be simultaneously lying. Okay? I just don't think I'm going to get a coherent answer to that, and I haven't. So that's what I would say. So we can go to Jim now. Where is he? Oh, there he is. Do I need to be dis-mic'd?
Yeah.
Okay. Where are the dis-micers?
You got it.
There's that one. Okay.
Wherever you want it. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, comfy. Yeah, it's hot in here. Whenever you're ready.
Can I sit right here?
If you're ready to play your video, just give me a wave.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
We got to get you some music to go with that.
We do. We do.
I don't know if I'm ready for this.
I have a theremin that we could put in there. I think would be really cool. All right, if we're ready, guys. Okay, great. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Jim Hickman, and most of you know me as a radio show host. And I've been doing that for quite a few years now. And I've interviewed a lot of the folks that are guest speakers here, and I guess I've got a lot of knowledge from them. And also interviewed David Jacobs several times and talked to him about the alien abduction phenomenon. Talked with Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is also famous for working with abductees. And he also mentions that abductees have had major problems throughout their lives after they have encounters with aliens. And I don't blame them. After we get done with this presentation, I think you'll see why. they have problems. Well, I almost call it post-traumatic stress syndrome, like folks in NOM have, because it is such a stressful situation. That's why when folks address me, they contact me through my website or they'll call me at home and they say, I've been abducted. I refer them to the professional people, the doctors, Dr. Sprinkle, John Mack, the rest of them, because they have the knowledge that it takes to help these people through their problems. I'm glad to see the guy is working on getting the churches involved in this. Maybe we can help get the pastors to help people through these kinds of phenomena, help them understand in their head what's going on, and help them make sense of it. Because these folks are going around thinking they're crazy, and they're not. They're just being abducted by aliens. First off, I should probably tell you how the modern era of abduction started. And this was back, the modern era of UFO started here in Roswell, 47. Modern era of abduction started back in 1961 in New Hampshire with Betty and Barney Hill. I'm sure you know about them. They're pretty famous. They had a movie made about them. They were on their way home one night in New Hampshire. Barney was worked for the post office. Real nice guy. Betty was a social worker. They were on their way home. They had noticed some stars up in the sky, and some researchers have found that it may have been the planet Saturn and Jupiter. Or at least they say so. If the planet Saturn can move, I guess in the sky, I guess it was. But anyway, they had a very close encounter with this UFO. Came down very, very close to them. Barney took out his binoculars, took a look at it. It had a double-decker row of windows, square windows in it. They saw beings inside this UFO, and he remembers seeing a bright red light shining down on them. Afterwards, after their abduction encounter, they had missing time. Several hours are missing. And Barney had some wounds on him around his groin area that persisted for quite some time, for years. Barney's no longer with us, by the way. Betty is still involved in ufology. She spoke at MUFON a couple of years ago in New York. And she's still around, and we still have her dress that she wore that night as evidence. And it still has the strange powder that's attached to it. You may have seen the report on that in the MUFON Journal recently. We don't know what happened to her. We know it's a strange experience. We know that, they were abducted, as far as we could tell. Now, why? They were told, Betty was told things. She was given a book at one point by the aliens that was supposed to have all kinds of great knowledge in it. But then I guess they changed their mind because they took it back. And they wouldn't let her take it with her. But they did show a star chart of a place called Zeta Reticuli that we've all heard about, some 39 light years away from us here on Earth. And if this is where these folks are from, they're a little more advanced than we are. Scientists are saying that star system is 1 billion years older than ours. Can you imagine the technology that's involved being 1 billion years more advanced than us? I mean, they would seem like a quote-unquote god to us because they're able to do magical things. They can appear and disappear. They can do things that are supernatural. These people from Zeta Reticuli, if that's where they came from, it'd be very easy for them to come here because it's only 39 years. That's almost someplace that we could reach with chemical rockets if we had the time. So it's very possible that this could happen. But we didn't know back in '61 that there were planets around the star system in Zeta Reticuli. Scientists now have found planets circling that star system. So Betty was right. She was right back in '61. Barney wasn't the only person that had medical problems, medical things done to him during that abduction. Betty Hill had a procedure done on her where they stuck a long needle into her belly button. And they told her that there was a medical procedure that they do quite routinely. And I thought, that's kind of strange. Today we call it amniocentesis. It's done routinely on girls after they've had, during pregnancy. This was something that was developed in the 50s and 60s here, and wasn't widely used beyond the laboratories on lab rats until the 70s and 80s. But yet this was performed on her by aliens in '61. So this is another, she just has some really interesting things that she has said about aliens. I've got a letter here that Stacy McGee with the Alternate Realities Conference sent me on this very subject. And one of the things that Betty had mentioned, just in off passing, was that these aliens like to play with emergency vehicles. This is completely off the subject, but it amazed me. I have a background, by the way. I'm a biomedical engineer. I've been working in the medical field since over 30 years. And I also have a paramedic. I've been a paramedic instructor for many, many years. I started out in Vietnam as a combat medic, served 2 years in Vietnam. I have a degree in fire science and in electronics. So I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. So when I saw this thing about aliens playing with emergency vehicles, she describes them as, they like to chase them. Says the police cars, they like them because they have the blue lights. They'll shine blue lights at them in sequence with the police car. And then fire trucks, they have red lights where she lives. And the aliens like to flash the red lights at them. I thought, most people just pass that off and laugh at it and go on. And I would have too, except for I had an encounter myself in 1982 in Oklahoma where this exact incident happened. So I take this a little bit more seriously. I was driving home late one night in an ambulance between Lawton, Oklahoma and Elk City, Oklahoma with my partner. And this is my new book, The Alien Menace, by the way. And we were going more detail. I'm not going to get in depth detail here, but we came across a huge UFO. I'll describe it as a mile across. It was over our heads at about 50 to 75 feet. You could feel the electromagnetic vibrations off this thing. You could feel the heat off of it. You could see the actual structure of this craft. It was so close. It flew right over our head and stopped and shined down a red light on us. And I knew pretty much about UFOs. I've been involved in UFOs since 1962. I'll tell you about that incident here in a little while after the break. But we shined our red lights at this UFO because we thought we were being cute. Yeah, they did the same thing. The same thing that Betty Hill talks about in 1961. They did to me. And I've never heard this in all the other research that's been done, that this happens. But here's this letter that came from Betty Hill just last week. And she mentions this. I thought I'd just bring that up and just another point that convinced me that there's something going on here because she knows about this phenomenon. So that's all I'm going to talk about, Betty Hill, Barney Hill. That's a great case. I'm sure you know about Travis Walton over here in Arizona. I've interviewed him several times on my show. Travis was abducted by aliens. Okay, they were up on a lumber crew up in the mountains up where was it? Sunset, Arizona, I believe. Snowflake, thank you. And he was abducted and was missing for 5 days. The sheriff's department were questioning his fellow workers. They thought they'd killed him. Travis is the nicest guy you ever want to meet. As honest as the day goes on. He's just a wonderful guy. If you ever get a chance to meet him at a conference, get with him. He's a great guy. But he was gone for 5 days. And when he came back, it changed his life. To this day, he is still psychologically harmed from what these aliens did to him. You may have seen the movie that was a sort of depiction of his life. He was scared beyond belief. Okay? And this is just one example. When we get into my speech here, I've got 90 some odd cases we're going to go through real quickly of things, everything from alien encounters that give people sunburns all the way up to human mutilations. Hope you guys have a strong stomach because a guy asked me to bring medical evidence with me to this program. He wants medical evidence of human abduction and human mutilations. Folks, in my hand here, I have that evidence. This was sent to me just this month by friends of mine in Brazil. This is an autopsy report. It's written in Portuguese from Brazil of a case we're going to talk about a little later, the Garapanga Reservoir case, involving a human mutilation that this document here proves beyond doubt was not done by human hands. And with that, I think I'm going to we're going to go on to and take about a 5-minute break here. We're going to set up the presentation, and we're going to start off lightly. And if anybody has a problem seeing autopsy reports at the end, we're going to have 3 or 4 pictures here that are rather gross. So I warn you, please. Okay? And when we get back, we'll talk more about this. Thank you.